Of the million reasons I love Andor, this week highlights probably my favorite reason, and that's that it takes its time and it's confident in the story that it wants to tell. Most mainstream TV shows, the really big ones, use the penultimate episode to a season to be the big, over the top climax, and then they use the finale as kind of the falling action. Not saying the finale can't have twists and turns or big action sequences, but typically shows like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, they all use that second to last episode as the big climax. But Andor here does the opposite. It takes a step back and allows our characters to sit in all of the events that have happened up to this point, especially the prison break last episode. And it results in one of the most emotional episodes of this season. And I did want to sit with this episode a bit longer because I think the first time I watched it, I of course enjoyed myself, but it took a couple days for it to really sink in. I think my first reaction to the episode wouldn't have been as nuanced or well structured as I think it is now that I've been able to watch it again and really take in those really complex and frankly deep character moments that we got in this episode. And I want to get into all of them. But again, I have to commend Andor for being confident in what story it wants to tell and not falling into any trends or structure of typical television. I want to highlight Luthen's episode because, again, I think it adds so much more intrigue into his character. We get these moments where we still don't know where that line is. Of course, last week we got this emotional speech about how he burns his decency, how he left all his dreams behind in the past. But in this episode, again, we get those moments where we don't know what part of him is being strategic. Is he actually upset? Is he actually sad to be losing an asset? Is he actually regretting some of his decisions? Or is he playing an act to make sure his pieces stay in line? And one scene you'll think one thing, and then the next scene he'll have a dialogue with Clea, his assistant, and you're like, wait, okay, maybe that wasn't genuine. And again, it just builds that intrigue around his character, which I think only Stellan Skarsgård could bring this nuance to a character. I do want to touch on Clea a little. That's a weird way to phrase that, but I do want to talk about her character because she's been in the background a lot. She's been integral to Luthen's plans, but I think we haven't been able to explore her a lot. And here she got a little bit of catharsis here while talking to Vel. And there's an interesting fan theory I saw online that I do want to get into a little bit later. Did I mention Luthen's escape scene? That was incredible. I'm going to talk about that as well. I think the main star of the show here is, well, literally the star of the show, Andor. His scene at the end is heartbreaking, and I really love this revelation and how he accepts his fate as joining the rebellion. I'll get into that a little later. Of course, the score in this episode was just fantastic between his scene and Mon Mothma's scene. Again, she has a small part in this episode, but it's very emotionally charged. It's a big moment for her, and it's really that breaking point that she's pretty much at, and I do want to talk about that. But to start, I do want to talk about seeing droids deal with the loss of their owner is something that we've seen bits and pieces of in Star Wars with R2, C-3PO, or Chopper in Rebels. But the great thing about TV is we can really sit in these moments and explore the mind state of a droid when they lose someone close to them. And we see B just wants to be surrounded by people he knows. He's lost Marva at this point, which is the big driving force of this episode. And he hasn't seen Cassian in so long, he doesn't even know if Cassian's still planning on coming back home. So he just wants to be surrounded by people at this point. He keeps asking Cassian's friend, can you stay? Let's hang out, pretty much. And it's just really sad to watch because he's lost kind of his purpose in this galaxy. And there's so many great shots in this scene, him looking out the window as they carry out her body, or, of course, that amazing transition from the cliffside into the house where you're looking through his lens and the cup starts shaking on his head and it's really tense, and then boom, it kind of all releases and you realize what's happened. So I just wanted to highlight B. I'm very excited to see what happens next week when he sees Cassian, because I think all roads are, of course, leading back to Ferrix. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight, a droid mourning was something we haven't seen this in depth in Star Wars. So I really, really enjoyed this. So as I mentioned in the intro, we have to talk about Luthen. And he has a really interesting scene with Saw here. Does he actually care about Saw, or is he just trying to save an asset? On one hand, he seems regretful that he is losing Krieger and giving him up. He even says, Saw says, you think it's worth losing Krieger? And he says, I did, but I'm not sure right now. He takes pauses. It's almost like he's struggling to say the words, like he almost doesn't mean it. And that's what gives me the insight that he does regret these decisions. And whenever Saw says, how many men? 30 men? And then Luthen keeps saying plus Krieger, almost saying that he knows what he's losing. He knows that he's losing a person. And I think that gives that insight into his mind state. Like, he does know he's a bad person. I think that was obvious last week with the speech, but seeing him struggle with it in real time while having these conversations is so interesting into what his character is going through. And Forrest Whitaker is giving it his all here, just showing how paranoid Saw is and how off his rocker he just always is. He's like, you probably have a man here. If you have someone at the ISB, you have someone at Krieger. And Saw isn't much to the strategy side of things. He's always been the shoot first, ask questions later character. So him being this sparring partner for Luthen is really interesting because Luthen is the brains and Saw is the brawn. So they're really not going to be on the same page. But by the end of the scene, we get that really cool line from the trailer where Saw says, for the greater good. And he's like, call it what you will. And he's like, let's call it war, which Saw's been waiting for. I mean, you even see he smiles like this is what he's always known. He's been in war for so long now, fighting against the powers of the galaxy. And now hearing that he's going to not be supported because he has his own little faction, but the fact that everyone's now going to be fighting alongside him is something that excites him. So again, really enjoyed this scene, and it's followed up with this call with Kleya, where everything I just said about Luthen being upset or maybe sad that he is losing people, not just assets, is kind of retracted, because then it's almost talked about like a business call. She's like, did you lose the asset? And he's like, yeah, I closed the deal, but it was more expensive than I hoped, which is an interesting line, which at this point I don't fully understand now, because here he's saying not sending Saw is more expensive than he hoped. But when he went there, that was his intention, or was it his intention to not make Saw go? Because maybe he thought in his mind that if Saw pushed back and said, no, I'm going, then maybe Krieger had a chance to survive, and then he would keep both assets, or he would lose assets. It was a very interesting dynamic. And again, when he pulls the gun on Saw in the scene, he says, I'm doing this for your own good, saying like, I don't want to lose you. Is it an asset? Does he care for Saw? We don't know. It's all very interesting. And I just appreciate the very smartly written kind of alias dialogue he has between Kleya and himself about closing deals and the market's getting too crowded. And I think at the end they are talking about Cassian. Kleya mentions that he's very much still on the market, and Luthen's like, well, we have to snatch him up because we don't want him to go to other buyers, essentially maybe other rebel factions. Luthen wants him to be part of his kind of push for the rebellion, not someone like Saw's maybe. And Kleya just got that info from Vel in the previous scene. And I do want to talk about that scene really quick because Kleya almost has a Luthen-like moment where Vel almost questions what she's even contributing to this. She's like, I gave him Aldhani. What have you done lately? Kind of like last week when the guy was like, well, what do you sacrifice, Luthen? And both of them just are blown away. They're like, do you know what I sacrifice? Do you know what I give up? Do you know what I've given? Vel says, what have you done lately? And Kleya's like, what have I done lately? I don't have lately. I have always. It's a constant blur of spinning plates and needy people with panic faces in the window asking for help, kind of like what you're doing now. And I just kind of like the parallel between that. And I do want to talk about this theory online, and I do not like out there theories. I don't really subscribe to that side of stuff. I know people love it, especially Troy. Troy loves theories and going on YouTube and all that. But there's a theory which I actually thought was pretty interesting. I don't believe it. Essentially, people are saying that Kleya is undercover Leia. Let me say that again. They think that Leia Organa is Kleya undercover working for Luthen. And when I heard that, I was like, that's a dumb title. But then I was like, Leia, Kleya, she does kind of look like her. She was in the Senate as like an apprentice in her teenage years, which would be right now. So she would be on Coruscant. It was a very interesting theory. I don't believe it, but it is funny how her name's like Kleya, Leia. She looks like her. She's on Coruscant. She's kind of in the beginning of the rebellion. It kind of goes against the book, Princess of Alderaan, so I don't think they read that book because Leia found out the rebellion through her parents, or kind of her investigation of her parents being very secretive, so it wouldn't make sense that she was part of the rebellion before that. But again, we'll see. It was a fun theory. I just wanted to bring it up for you guys. So Luthen's escape scene, fantastically choreographed. The tension was great and really highlights that Luthen's been doing this a long time. Was he trained to be a pilot? Was he trained in combat in his past life? Who knows? But you can just tell he's extremely adept. He's done this before. He takes out 4 TIE fighters in the blink of an eye and destroys the tractor beam in this really smart way. Essentially, you're in the tractor beam and it wasn't pulling him hard enough. So he had to feign that he was trying to escape so that they would pull harder and that he could release debris. I don't know what the countermeasures were, but if the tractor beam's pulling harder, it doesn't matter what you release out of the back. It's going to go flying into that tractor beam, and it essentially just tears it apart. And it would, like, visually, in this scene is movie quality. It's just fantastic. And I do want to talk about his lightsaber ship kind of thing. I don't think it's lightsabers. I think it's more of a focused ray shield kind of, because ray shields are that red kind of color. And to have a red lightsaber, you would have to be a dark side user. You can't just like put a kyber crystal into a thing and be like, okay, now it's a lightsaber. So I don't really think that it's a lightsaber. I think it's more of a ray shield, but we do know that he has access to rare things like kyber crystals. So I don't think it's outside the possibility. It would be interesting that if he was maybe a Jedi in his past, and now that he's done all these terrible things in the name of good, in the name of rebellion, that maybe his lightsaber color would be corrupted into red, but that is a out there theory. I don't actually believe that, but if I were to go down that path, maybe that's where I would go with it. So just wanted to bring that up. But the lightsaber ship, I mean, that's sweet. And yeah, I loved his escape. It was so calculated. It was so fun to watch, and it gave us a little bit of that action boost in a very emotional episode, which I didn't need the action, but I know some people do. So I'm glad they got it here. So I think it's time to talk about Cassian's journey in this episode. While I do think it was very convenient that the aliens did just say, oh, where do you want to go? We'll take you anywhere. I do think they set it up nicely by having them have this conversation with them about, you know, the Empire's ruined our lives. The Empire's taken all of our food. They've screwed up the water here. We're no friend of the Empire. We're happy to help anyone we can, which I appreciated from an alien perspective here. But there was a lot of moments where Cassian really shined here. The first scene when Melshi and him are climbing the thing, and Melshi's like, I can't do it. And Cassian doesn't scream at him or anything like, come on, we need to get out of here. He kind of just says, I hear you, man. I'm on your side. It's tough. I'm with you. They're going away. They're leaving. And just kind of those subtle hints give Melshi that inner strength to pull himself up and keep going. Again, having Cassian be more of or really someone who inspires other people and isn't that rah-rah leader that gets in your face and you have to do this, we have to get out of here. It kind of continues that storyline that he had with Kino last week and how he inspired himself to find that inner power and inner strength to break everyone out and be that leader that Kino always was. But yeah, we have to talk about Marva's passing and this effect on Cassian. Of course, I'm talking about that last scene where he gives the call to Ferrix like, hey, let my mom know that I'm okay and that she would be proud of me. And this line is just perfect because it shows that Cassian has accepted his role in being a part of something that's bigger than himself. Throughout this season, he's always been looking out for himself. He's been the lone wolf. Even when he was part of a team, he's like, I'm just doing this for myself. When I get my money, I'm out of here. But now that he's been a part of this uprising and really needing to rely on others to rise up and escape, it really has changed him. He's not just out for himself anymore, and it's something that she would want. It's something that she always preached. She was a rebel at heart, and Cassian never fully understood that. And now that he sees the world through her lens, it's this really great full circle moment where he's going to kind of carry that torch for her. And it's heartbreaking that she never was able to see him go through this transformation, but in her heart, she probably knew that he would figure it out eventually. And you just got to give it up to Diego Luna throughout this whole sequence. He never sheds a tear, but you could see his eyes are so distant and there's no one there. He's not really in that moment. And I love how Melshi says, it's like a dream, isn't it? Fresh air, so much space. And for Cassian, it's not a dream. It's a nightmare right now. Melshi goes on to talk about, we need to tell people about this. We need to let the galaxy know that this stuff is happening. At this point, it's likely that Aldhani is the only thing that's been galaxy-wide news. So it's important that people know that that just wasn't a one-off thing, that this group of 5,000 prisoners was able to escape this high-security Imperial prison. They might not have all survived, but as long as him or Cassian survives and is able to tell that story, that'll inspire others to rise up as well. And I think that's such a cool perspective to bring to this galaxy at this point, and the fact that Melshi can see that. And even though Cassian's reeling from just hearing the news of his mother's passing, he even says, not enough people made it out. And he agrees with him. He's like, yes, we do have to spread this story. And the moment when they say goodbye and Cassian reaches out for that hug, you can almost see in Diego's performance that Cassian doesn't want to let go of the hug. It was like a feeling of comfort to be embraced by someone in that moment. And you could see him almost like lean in harder towards the end, and he didn't want it to end. He wanted someone to be there for him, but he understood that he had to hold it together for Melshi. He had to be strong for Melshi in that moment. It was very subtle, but I think it conveyed a lot and just proves that you don't need tears to convey sadness so powerfully. And I have to talk about the score. We get a reprisal of Marva's Rebellion, which I posted on Music Mondays a couple weeks ago. Only this time it's more of a funeral procession kind of feel. It's much more heavy on the strings, and it's much more lonely and somber. And I love it, and I can't wait for it to come out. It'll probably be called like Marva's Rebellion Reprisal, or maybe Daughter of Ferrix, because that's the name of this episode. And she was a daughter of Ferrix. And so I'm excited to see how they name that title, and I can't wait to listen to it when it does officially release. And that's why I love establishing themes and motifs in the score throughout the show, because it follows along on the character's journey with you, and it makes those moments connect so much more. If Marva didn't have a theme, then this moment would probably still have a sad kind of score to listen to, but the fact that this was Marva's theme and it's now carried into a moment when she has died and passed is so much more effective. And this whole scene with the sun setting, almost kind of representing Cassian on the beach on Scarif when the Death Star blows it up, is kind of haunting. But I love this scene. It's beautiful, and I love how they ended the episode here. I do have to quickly talk about my queen, Mon Mothma, another heartbreaking scene in her list of heartbreaking scenes throughout this season. But this one, she's at her breaking point. You can see that she is on thin ice, holding it together, and Vel is the only person she can vent about this with. And even in this moment, she's still holding back, and it's so tough to watch. And the only thing I really can talk about in this scene is Genevieve's performance, again, giving Emmy-worthy performances in all these episodes, and this one with the glassy eyes and looking through Vel and kind of her eyes looking around, blinking very sporadically, and in the end, when she says, I found a solution, and the door opens and her daughter walks out, she almost like loses her breath. She almost like, because she knows what she has to do. She knows she has to basically condemn her daughter to a life that she has been trying to get away from. An arranged marriage that Mon Mothma lived through and came out on the other end worse for it. And again, the score in this scene, we hear Mon Mothma's theme throughout the season, but again, it's a different kind of take and version of it. It's much more scaled back. It's less over the top. It's very intimate, and it adds that emotional connection and kind of that through line throughout the season for her score following her as she goes through this journey. And I think we know in this moment she realizes that her family is over and her relationship with her daughter is just about to slip out of her hands as she watches her from afar. It's really that cool perspective of her being on the other side of the room looking from a distance as her daughter basically leaves. And Mon Mothma, again, killing me every week. But those are all my thoughts on this week's episode. Emotional, toned back, but still had those moments of action. And in the fashion of Andor throughout this season, it's all going to come back full circle writing to Ferrix. We know Cyril's heading there. We know Deidre's going to be there. We know Bix is still there. We know Luthen and Clea are aware of the funeral happening on Ferrix. We know Vel and Cinta are going to be on Ferrix for this funeral. And we know Andor is probably going to head back in secret, and all roads lead back to Ferrix. And I've heard early rumblings. There have been some media pressers sent out of the finale, and they've said it's phenomenal. And essentially, if you have expectations for the finale, throw them out, because they're going to surpass them in every way. So no surprise here, but I am so excited and sad that we're wrapping up Andor already. But throughout this journey, it's been fantastic Star Wars, fantastic TV. And I think the finale has a runtime of 56 minutes, so one of the longer episodes, so well-deserved. And it's gonna be crazy. Every player is gonna be in the same place for the first time throughout this season, and I think sparks are gonna fly, not in the good way. I'm excited to see how they wrap this up, and excited for everyone to know about it. I feel like when this finale drops and all the reviewers that I follow on YouTube that usually review after a full season is out for a TV show. I feel like once they give their reviews of this completed season, I think the demand, the viewership is going to skyrocket, and it's going to make season 2 one of the biggest shows on TV. I firmly believe that. And then it's award season time when that time comes around, because Andor is going to start raking in the nominations. Best Ensemble Cast at the SAG Awards for Drama Series. I see that in their future for sure. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for listening. Follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. Follow me on all the content I've been doing and seeing some of my clips from these episodes, and yeah, just staying up to date on all this stuff. And Music Mondays, of course, to hear my thoughts about scores from Star Wars and broader media. So yeah, thank you again for listening, and as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.